Welcome to another edition of On the Bookshelf. I'm Pete Solomon. What are the components that create great music? Well, essentially there are two. There's an artist with technique and talent and passion, and a musical instrument, perfectly constructed, perfectly tuned. If either is missing, great music cannot be created. In the new book, The Symphony Heist, A Tale of Music and Desire by Kameel Nasr, the instruments belonging to the Boston Symphony are stolen just before they are headed for Rio for an important concert. The Symphony Heist by Kameel Nasr, and now our author reads an excerpt.
22 minutes before the heist, a lone woman waits in a stolen blue Toyota in front of the National Braille Press. Her two accomplices take their positions on St. Stephen Street. 2 Boston blocks away, a man in a black parka stands near the Christian Science Mother Church across from Symphony Hall. 2 Peter Pan buses are parked outside its Mass Ave entrance, ready to take the musicians to Logan Airport for a concert in Rio de Janeiro. Another 2 blocks away, forming an equilateral triangle with the Toyota, the Boston Symphony Orchestra principal cellist locks her apartment and walks down Westland Street, her white fiberglass cello case strapped to her back. On this quiet Sunday morning in January, where the air should be still and empty, everything sounds staccato to her. A car accelerates sharply and brakes. A lone robin chirps up the scale and stops. A dog barks in short yelps. She feels music like other people feel hot and cold. Her perfect pitch transforms every sound into notes. She converts people's voices into musical rhythms. She knows by resonance when the wind shifts directions. All she needs is a couple of bars and she pins the composition. Long before she developed her revolutionary bowing and fingering technique, she could listen to a new piece of music and then go home and play it, as the 14-year-old Mozart had done when he heard Allegri's Miserere in the Sistine Chapel, a work that was forbidden to be played outside the chapel. She pauses at the corner of Mass Ave, where 24 protesters are holding a banner that reads, "Don't go BSO." She inches up to them, her face covered against the cold, or so she thinks. 1 month ago, the BSO shocked the musical world by announcing that the Rio concert will be connected to the signing of the Advancement of the Arts Agreement, an international treaty for copyright royalties and subsidies, an agreement she and almost all musicians had protested against. But it got rammed through Congress after mountains of campaign donations from internet providers. Now the BSO will give it legitimacy. She has to play for the signing of a treaty she had campaigned against. Conflict of interest, the interest of corporations versus artists. Guess who won?
A taste of the novel The Symphony Heist, A Tale of Music and Desire, read by the author, Kameel Nasr. Thank you very much.
Pete, it's really good to be on your show.
Well, thank you. This is the second Boston cozy mystery. The first one was the museum heist.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, the museum heist takes, as you could probably guess, takes its position from the Gardner Museum, the heist of the Gardner Museum, but it's a fiction story like this story is. So I solve the case. I solve it in the first chapter. In fact, somebody finds the art, and he happens to be a classical scholar who finds the art. And a little conceited guy, you know, he did time in prison for art forgery, by the way. And so he uses his knowledge of antiquity to solve the crime, to find out who the thieves were.
We'll talk about your work, but I think it's only right that we talk a little bit about you. Now, we could talk about all the things that you've done in a marvelous lifetime, but we only have 30 minutes. So let's just mention the fact that in addition to being a writer, a cyclist, a dancer, an astronomer, among other things, deeply involved in art and music, You were born in Lebanon. You were raised in San Francisco, but
Yeah.
you were educated at DePaul University. What was the difference between growing up in the Bay Area and winding up on the streets of Chicago?
Gosh, you know, I lived in many places along the way. I did travel around the world by bicycle, and that was just an eye-opening experience because to go into poor countries, Africa, Asia, and it was just such a rich experience. And then I lived a little bit in Europe. I still go back. I'm in Europe every year, and I loved Chicago. Went to DePaul, did masters there as well, and I came here about 20 years ago. Loved it here. I'm very happy here. Made it my home. And I really support the arts, the local cultural scene here as well.
You alluded to your world travels, and that led to you writing the book, The World Up Close, your first book.
Right.
And essentially it's a view of the world over your handlebars, right?
Yes. So that book actually came out in 1990. So and I republished again after 25 years. And it tells stories from different cultures. So I try to be multicultural. I try to tell stories about this country, that country, the people of that country. So it's a story not really about my handlebars, although biking is a big thing for me. It's a story about cultures, about people, and how in a sense we're all very similar, and we have our differences as well.
Briefly, how's the world changed since you first wrote the book?
It's changed a lot. So I wrote it. It came out in 1990. It was published by Mills and Sanderson in 1990, and so there was a Yugoslavia, for example. There was a Soviet Union. By the way, I applied to bicycle in the Soviet Union. And they hedged and hawed and finally said no, they can't do it. And I applied in other places too. I applied to Saudi Arabia. They said absolutely no. You know, other countries. So many countries were closed. There was Iran and Iraq war at the time. So things have changed. Probably for the worse in many cases. A lot more war, a lot more hostility, and a lot more climate change. Yeah.
Now, sometimes in a world that is often involved in upheaval, people like to just simply lose themselves in a book, and you've given us an opportunity to do that twice. In modern mystery fiction, we see so many books with murder in the title.
Yeah.
But you have gone in a different direction. Instead, your first two books in the Boston Cozy series are high-profile robberies. How come?
Exactly, yeah. And I'm coming out with another robbery, by the way. So, yeah, you know, I don't want to write about murders. I don't want to write about guns. I want to write something that's more positive. And so, like, for example, this was a very negative thing that happened, this $500 million worth of art. I know the case pretty well. I don't think it's going to be solved ever. And I wanted to make it something positive. So I made this kind of nice story into something positive. I don't really want to use guns and murder. I like reading murder mysteries as well. And but for me, something that is just as much of a mystery is the heist, right? The Gardner heist is just as much of a mystery. In this story here, the Symphony heist, the instruments of the BSO are robbed, and we have to find out who did it and why. That's for me just as intriguing. Yeah.
Very modestly, you mentioned that you have a great interest in the arts, and particularly music, and you know your way around Boston Symphony Hall, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I go there all the time. I'm there a lot. I love the BSO. Very high class. I mean, we're so lucky to have such a high level of musicality in this city. Of course, the BSO, but other orchestras are really top notch here. You don't find that in a lot of the urban area. You have maybe one good orchestra. I don't want to pick the cities, but here we have many good orchestras, chamber musics, quartets. It's really astounding for the classical music scene, as well as other music as well. But it's really a very high class here.
Kameel Nasr, our guest. The book we're talking about is The Symphony Heist. This is On the Bookshelf, and I'm Pete Solomon. Kameel, let's talk a little bit about the main character. Melody Cavatina is a remarkable cellist. You play the clarinet, you play the bagpipes. Why did you choose for your principal character to play the cello?
I played the cello for a little bit.
Really?
I was never good at it, you know. But I did learn the cello, and I played a little bit, and I haven't touched it for quite a long time. So I do know the cello, and it's a beautiful instrument. It's just when you hear what the cello can do, it's such an evocative. And one of the points that the book makes is the cello is in the range of the voice, so it kind of speaks, right? A violin is really high, but a cello really kind of speaks, and I just love the instrument. So she is not classically trained. What happened is her mother died in a fire, and she was so distraught that she didn't play the cello again. She had that was the day her mother died was the day she did her first audition, first competition, I should say. And she won this competition, and she was really traumatized afterwards. So she learned on her own. She played in her own apartment, and she developed this technique. Now it's a little bit of a fantastic story, but not much, because when you're in a conservatory, you learn a particular way, and she wasn't in that, so she learned this wonderful technique. I don't know if anybody could do what she did, but it's a nice story anyway.
Speaking about one of the things that makes Melody unique is she hears music in everything.
Yes.
Is this possible? Do musicians do this?
Yes. There are people who have perfect pitch, and they're very rare, like 1 in 10,000. So they have this pitch. And there are musicians, I know this, there are musicians who just think in music. They everything to them is sound, and sound sometimes equated with colors and so on. But people are like this. There are people who are just music, and we don't know this. We like to talk. Their language is something else. Yeah.
As a writer, you brought 2 very interesting literary conventions to this work. One is, you mentioned, as we were listening to your excerpt, you will say 22 minutes before the heist. In other words, we know what's coming before it comes, but we don't know how it comes. How did you hit on that idea?
Gee, I don't know how I hit on it, but I thought it was a great idea.
It is a great idea.
And I'm doing it for my next book, actually. I thought it was a good idea. Because, so there's 20, the first thing is 22 minutes before the heist, and then on every chapter has a certain time.
65 minutes before somebody's going to be arrested.
Before Melody swears to find it, and so on. So it gives a little foreshadowing of what's to come.
The other thing is, it's hard to read your book without learning something. Every chapter heading defines a musical term.
Right.
There is so much within the narrative that will teach even the most sophisticated listener new and different things. How much of this did, in a percentage basis, come about based on your research, and how much of it did you already know?
I think I already knew this. But it's hard to figure out what to say. One of the things you have to do as a writer is you have to concentrate on the story. The story is the most important thing. So you can add facts and information about music. I could write a whole treatise about music, but other people can write it a lot better than I could. But I could write a lot about music, but then it robs the story. So you have to kind of hone down your facts into certain things. And so like at the beginning of each and in fact the one I just opened to, it says perfect pitch, and it describes what perfect pitch is. Another is harmony, those different things, and it kind of describes those things. I try to be informative. I want to be informative. I want to actually celebrate classical music and spread classical music. Not that I don't like other music. I dance tango, and I love tango music. Dance swing music. I love dancing swing, rock and roll. But there's something in classical music and our heritage, and it's such a shame that it's not really being taken up as much by young people as it was. So I want to celebrate that.
But you said something interesting within the context of the book. You suggest that interest in classical music isn't waning, it's in transition. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I think there's young people now, there's a lot of classically trained musicians, young musicians, and they have a different idea about what should we call it, the presentation. Like if you go to the concert, any concert at the BSO or at Sanders Theater or in Peterborough, New Hampshire. So there's kind of a ritual that goes in. The orchestra's seated, they tune up. The conductor comes on, he makes a bow to the audience, and everybody stands. The audience applauds. There's a whole ritual, and then he goes at the end of it. He goes off. Everybody applauds. He comes back on. Everybody applauds again. It's I don't know. It's not something that the young people really cotton on to, that ritual. They love the music, but they can't really relate to that stiffness that comes with the classical music, the baggage that we've inherited. So I think that things might change, like everybody's sitting down and now orchestras, a lot of them are standing up. The violins and the cellos are seated, and everybody's kind of standing
like
up.
Like the old jazz big bands when somebody took a solo.
Oh, well, yes, but standing all the time. Oh. Yeah, but also standing up. So when the horn section has their solo, they would stand up. The Boston Pops does this.
Interesting.
And yeah, and just kind of making it a little bit more interesting. And also, you could listen to music from on CDs or on YouTube, right? It's not the same as listening to live music. I don't know what it is, but there's something that's absolutely different in listening to live music.
There's a certain electricity in a live performance.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you something, Pete. It just reminded me of something. The Met Opera has these HD performances, right?
Yes,
I don't know if you've ever attended them. And so when they're broadcast live to theaters around here, around the world, in fact. And so when there's a live performance, it's really kind of electric, even though you're in a movie theater. It's actually happening in New York City. They have what they call encore performances to take place a couple of days later for people who couldn't come on that Saturday afternoon. And there's something like you're going to the movies on that. It's completely different than being in the live show, even though. And so in Symphony Hall, it's something, or in any venue, it's something really different to be in the live show, to listen and experience it live, because you can't get that same things out of speakers, out of your headphones.
Sure.
You can't get that same experience.
We should, Kameel, we should talk a little bit and connect the dots from the excerpt you read at the outset of this broadcast. The Symphony Heist centers on the instruments being stolen from the Boston Symphony Orchestra as they're being transported to the airport because the orchestra is going to play and debut a new piece in Rio. But there are political overtones to this. Could we talk about that? Yeah,
so the political thing was that there was going to be a trade agreement about copyrights and royalties. And I think this is a real issue right now because the music business has kind of been decimated. since iTunes, really. And now everybody downloads for free music, and musicians are really, they don't get anything out of that. And it's such a shame. And there has to be some new, and the same with authors. we poor authors. I had somebody in a class say, "Oh, I really liked your book." And what I did is I photocopied, 2 chapters that I gave my class to read. I mean, that's really nice. I really enjoyed that the class read and discussed the couple of chapters. It was a different book. Really just like that. But we have to do something to make sure that our creativity is alive and well. We have to give somehow money to compose. So I thought that this was something that is relevant today, whether this idea of royalties. So, so there's a controversy about this this proposal called the Advancement of the Arts Agreement, to which was really to screw artists out of their money.
Sure.
And Melody was one of those people who was fighting against this kind of thing. I don't know what the resolution is, Pete. I don't know how we can repay the musicians, because when we listen to something, they deserve something, right?
Sure, it's their right.
It's their right, yeah.
Of course. We talked about the plot, but one of the great strengths of this book is the characters. There's such a wide array of interesting characters in the book.
Oh, yeah.
We talked briefly about Melody, who's the centerpiece, the great young cellist of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, but Eduardo created the world compositions that are to be debuted in Rio, and he's also Melody's lover, and he seems to embody the artist's temperament. Did you write him that way?
Yes, he definitely does. He is definitely a composer, and he's been commissioned by several orchestras, which is really like the BSO. And to get a BSO commission, that's really tops. To get a commission from the London Symphony, that's really tops. And that's the thing, that today we have so many talented composers, and yet symphonies play all the dead composers, right? And you kind of sympathize with them. I sympathize with the people who put together the BSO program, because they say, when we play Beethoven, when we play Mozart, we have a full house. When the Boston Lyric Opera plays Tosca, as they're playing, they have a full house. When they play an unknown or a person, half the audience seats are empty, and so you sympathize. They want to play Beethoven, they want to play Mozart, but we have so many talented artists today, so many talented musicians. I've heard some wonderful compositions. I actually have some friends who are composers, and it would be wonderful to champion them as well. But there's another thing that you haven't touched on, Lieutenant Lowell.
That was, he is quirky, and his knowledge of the digestive system provides a very interesting contrast to his police work and his experience. And he's suddenly entrusted with this case, which over a short period of time now becomes world news. The entire world is watching. Right.
And Lieutenant Lowell started in the museum Heist. And he's going to be in my next novel. And I thought so this is kind of, these books are a little bit highbrow, maybe, culture and stuff like that. He is the counterweight to that. And I thought, everybody's telling me how delightful a character he is. He's kind of like Lieutenant Colombo. I didn't think about that when I wrote the book and developed his character, but I think that's right. He's kind of fumbling, but he's really astute, and so I really like him. Yeah, and he's very concerned about digestion and so on.
He is indeed. But it's his case, and yet now other agencies are coming to try to not only help solve the case, but sort of usurp some of his authority.
Right.
But he maintains
Yes.
his original thought, and you've thrown a few red herrings into this case.
Yeah, there's some red herrings. And to talk a little about the reality of the Gardner Museum heist is the FBI took that case right away. And I thought it was a real mistake that they did that because they should have had it. The Boston police were probably much more attuned to the kind of criminals the kind of thugs who robbed those those paintings. And there have been people from the FBI who have written about infighting that has hurt the case, and other things that seemed like that they didn't do a very good job of the case. I'm not a criminologist or anything like that, but yeah. So Lieutenant Lowell, of course, comes to the museum case, and he and the protagonist, they're working together, they're able to solve the case. Yeah.
This book benefits the Curiosity Foundation. Tell us about that.
So I started the Curiosity Foundation in 2016 and put a little bit of money into it, not much, just my little bit of money. And I wanted really to do something about climate change. I wanted to focus on that, but also to champion the arts. And so we've given grants to arts foundations, you know, little grants. I mean, it's just my. You need a lot of money to have. You need a lot of money to have a big impact on climate change. But I think we can do some local initiatives, and so we've funded a little bit for making bicycling more safe. You know, these advocacy groups.
Yes.
Thinking that you know, more bicycling. That's one of my things, right? You know, is bicycling. So thinking more bicycling is good. It's less congestion. It's less pollution. It's so on, and we'd like to do some other initiatives as well. So all the money goes to the foundation. I don't need the money, and I'm happy to support arts groups and to support people who will make some positive change.
It's a wonderful effort.
Yeah.
May I ask what the next Boston Cozy is going to be about?
Our next show.
Oh.
Next show.
That's a deal.
Yeah, it's the next. It's all based in Boston. It's all going to be about arts and science, and I haven't advanced far enough to let you know. But yeah, it's going to be something that's science based.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kameel Nasr, we certainly appreciate your visiting and sharing your thoughts, not only about the book, but classical music and the arts, and telling us a little bit about the Curiosity Foundation. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, Pete, thank you. It was really a great pleasure.
The book is The Symphony Heist. The author is Kameel Nasr. I'm Pete Solomon. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon.